Hello there. To all you fellow geeks, droids, and every wonderful life form on this planet, I hear, they apparently call Earth. Welcome to Superhero Displays. And for this, my first ever video review essay for and on superhero displays. As this is my first ever video review essay, I thought it best not to choose a topic that would be deemed, well, too controversial. Just ease into things, somewhat slow and steady, not rock the boat too much as it will. Therefore, being the once-in-a-generational, Einstein-level genius, clearly that I am, I, of course, chose Star Wars. Try as I might, I just could not take to Andor. However, as a fan, even if it can feel sometimes as though your eyes are bleeding, you often still try and stick with it. We probably do it for loyalty's sake as much as anything. Despite the fact that I didn't really at all take to the show, I certainly, without a shadow of a doubt, appreciated the craft of what was accomplished, at least from a technical perspective. So much so, it wasn't really all that much of a chore to watch every episode till its season's end. Every aspect of Andor was executed to phenomenally high standards. The acting performances, from humans, creatures, and droids alike, phenomenal. The cinematography, phenomenal. The sound, score, and even the main title theme music, all completely, utterly, and truly phenomenal. The only problem? It was a second Death Star level size of a hole. Where on Tatooine's sweating sand dunes Earth was the Star Wars? Where was the Star Wars inside this beautifully constructed, strange Blade Runner 2049 homage set piece of a peculiar program? This confused frustration started to glitch out my brain's internal geek computer's circuit chips. The glitch is predominantly caused by this major, if not main problem, with anything made since George Lucas departed his own creation's galaxy. If I don't see the George inside it, then my own personal headcanon hyperspaces the heck out of that particular sector. And, with Andor, my headcanon pulled back hard on those now unfortunately familiar thrusters. As gorgeous as everything in Andor looked and sounded, I just couldn't see the George anywhere inside of it. Please, let me be clear of what I mean by the George inside. It's hope. Hope. And no hope means no George. And no George, no Star Wars. I don't mind saying, I am a complete and total unashamedly fanatical George Lucas acolyte. Lucas has guided my stories and writing philosophies for decades. So, no George. No, well, me. And I know that so many of my fellow Lucas acolytes are vividly aware George Lucas created Star Wars for children. He wanted to create something similar to the children's adventures-based television serials he grew up watching, and which that brought him so much joy and gave him so much inspiration and hope as a child. And with Star Wars specifically, Lucas wanted to infuse that same feeling into kids, the same way by which he'd been so enthralled by growing up. This was extremely important to him. And no matter how good something made by current Lucasfilm looks, sounds, and even feels, if there's no George, it's not his vision. Therefore, to me, I'm sorry, but it is just not Star Wars. works, in strange and curious ways, the Force does. Distant echoes of Master Yoda's voice, approaching my headcanon's internal circuitry. His voice continues echoing, stronger and stranger, as something rather unexpected had started to occur, as I sat watching Episode 10, One Way Out. Oh wow! That moment. The one moment. The rebellion's chameleon gangster, Luthen Rael, is talking to ISB mole, Lonnie, via an earpiece as Lonnie travels upwards, inside an elevator, to heaven. When Lonnie arrives at his destination's level, the door ominously opens to reveal Rael, overlooking Coruscant's beating metropolitan nightlife. And of course being the gangster rebel that we now know him to be. His frozen cool. Adopting this full alpha dog power stance. Stood alone, atop an impossibly high building's bridge crossing, laden with see-through iron grids. Rail, exposed to all these skyscraping elements and a vertigo-inducing drop. One sickeningly long way down. His jaded cape billowing ghostly through oily, metallic, dusty drops spitting over a nefarious, night's inside breeze. Luthen begins his dialogue from a distance, out across those grids of grime, toward his panicked ISB inside man. And this extraordinary meticulous monologue of a pep talk for the ages gets capped off, in spellbinding fashion, with just one word. Just one. Answering the question, brazenly posed by a cracked Lonnie. And what do you sacrifice? Luthen's answer unleashes this soliloquy saber of a single solitary line. Delivered by a legitimately true Jedi Master of the Screen, in Stellan Skarsgård. Just one word. Just a single word finishes off the core of this majestic, meticulous monologue of myths and legends, that songs and sonnets are surely going to be written and composed in homage to, in the months and years to follow. I've already created mine. Stay tuned to the channel for more details, coming soon. Luthen haunts an oblivious Coruscant Knights revelers with that one pain-stricken line. Everything. 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 Cascading outwards to a galaxy's bourgeois capitals, bursting, ship-stacked horizon. And reverberating back off those dank iron grids. Devastatingly. Hauntingly beautiful. Now, given how I started this part by laying down some, not so subtle hints of foreshadowing regarding where my Lucas acolytes' opinions were probably, potentially heading, you could therefore be forgiven in thinking that was the moment when it all changed. And I finally came around to this very strange iteration into the hallowed Star Wars pantheon of screen-based projects. But you'd be just ever so slightly off base. That hauntingly beautifully delivered dialogue wasn't what changed the direction of travel for my particular George Lucas-piloted Starcruiser. You see, as I said, every aspect of Andor I'd already utterly respected and admired. So, this scene, these words, delivered by actors operating at the peak of their powers, was already par for the course. And utterly baked in by this point. I mean, this is now incredibly deep down, inside the season here, at episode 10 of 12. At this stage in the show's proceedings, I wouldn't in the slightest be expecting anything less than these levels of stellar exquisite filmmaking execution. I love and adore dense, adult dystopian science fiction. However, and I mean however in the absolute, strongest possible terms. However with all bells and all whistles in the world, however. George Lucas's creation is not, nor should it ever be, anything other than what the original creator intended. There's been far too much of this creative blasphemy occurring throughout the history of fiction. Even in today's, supposedly, modern timeline, Star Wars is not, nor should ever be, adult dystopian science fiction. Star Wars is an inspirational family fable, fantasy epic. I mean, come on, it's bloody Star Wars, for crying out loud. After Luthen's exquisite explosion, then comes a 180 bounty hunter's sniper double tap. And yet, the damage is just as ruthless. Luthen has one last sentence in his armory before he allows his man to leave their covert skyscraper meeting. "You'll stay with me, Lonnie. I need all the heroes I can get." Luthen pulls out a remote contraption and presses a button, triggering Lonnie's elevator door to close. Then it cuts straight to Cassian, fleeing from an impossible prison escape, of which he'd engineered, and the lead architect. There it was. That was the actual moment where everything flipped for me. Cassian Andor. Rebel. Fighter. Leader. Inspiration. Hope. Hope. After this, Episode 10. The show never relents on these vital George Lucas DNA themes. The stakes just keep jacking. Jacking, and jacking up some more. Both in the penultimate episode, Episode 11. Daughter of Ferrix. And then the wickedly presented finale. Episode 12. Rick's Road, which goes out with so many bangs, literally and metaphorically. It's total chaos theory, all over and surrounding Rick's Road. As the sparks of the rebellion are starting to finally flicker. In a scene towards the back end of the finale, just after Cassian has rescued Bix from an Empire makeshift prison cell, Cassian loads her almost lifeless body down onto her escaping ship's floor, piloted by two fleeing locals. All on board this escaping vessel clearly have real, deeply entrenched, neighboring historical kinship. Cassian explains to his rebel neighbors and compatriots that he has to leave, though without telling them why, no doubt to protect them for as long and as much as is possible in new times such as these for the galaxy. Of course, for all they know, he's returning straight to the front line to put himself into even more direct harm. So his fellow Ferrix compatriots, and now newly minted rebels, demand with lovingly troubled, worried tones Cassian's reassurance that he will make it back. He will find them again. Bix, slumped on the floor in a heap where Cassian left her, ironically, tries to give out some reassurance to this touching kinship grouping. And with delirious, torture exhaustion, barely conscious, pushes out through her beaten mouth. "He'll find us. He'll find us." Bix has complete and utter faith. She now believes in Cassian in a way like never before. Because Bix gets what's occurring in front of them all. Who Cassian is now. What he's become. A rebel. Fighter. Leader. Inspiration. Hope. Luthen, blindsided by a new member of his crew sneaking aboard. Then, recognizing near instantaneously, Cassian is not screwing around, the moment Cassian drops this bomb. A goosebump, chillingly, staggeringly fearless ultimatum. Shoot me. Or take me in. Rael's reaction to Cassian's depth charge of a proposal is as comforting as it is unnerving. Luthen, now having this exact same epiphany, that's washed over poor Bix's battered body. Cassian Andor is the one they've all been waiting for. The hope they've all been waiting, wanting, praying would arrive. The Empire's beaten down, foot on their galaxy's throats conditioning, could never truly and honestly believe this miracle could have been made an actualized reality. And yet, it's being realized. Actualized. In the form of a refugee from a planet they've probably never heard of, let alone visited. It is being actualized in their own, little old rogue. This and now what will soon become the entire galaxy's. Cass. When Bix's epiphany is passed on and through to Luthen Rael, he just ever so quietly, and simply, chuckles. The chuckle, it seems, born out of relief, inspiration, and some good old-fashioned George Lucas DNA. Luthen Rael's real face, revealed to us, for the first time, prompting Cassian to join him in the exuberance. And for all of the audience, to bear witness to this. The birthing of the rebellion. Just like the rebellion, this unique Star Wars show had been waiting, patiently, to light the fuse of my George Lucas acolyte of an imagination. And, my goodness, it certainly did that. Yes, it took to the very back end of the 10th episode in a 12-part season. But hey, is that just not entirely unlike that trusty and familiar archetypal hero in all of our favorite hero's journey-based stories? They show up just as the hope appears as though it's all but lost. Like so many of my fellow Star Wars fanatics, this show has been quite an expedition, to say the least. Despite that expedition being at times, yes, a tad arduous for many of us Lucas acolytes. In the end, I have come to this most unexpected of conclusions. A star-stellar world-class level creative team had a vision, and combined their special talents with real, true boldness and bravery. Took chances never before seen as these in the franchise's long, illustrious history. They stayed the arduous course, and absolutely nailed that ridiculously insane landing. These lunatic creatives somehow managed to obtain impossible cheat codes to present this rock-solid, if not cast iron case, that Cassian is the hope in Andor. Cassian is the Star Wars in Andor. Cassian Andor is the George in Andor. Eventually, they gave us George. George was there all along, a little obscured, hiding ever so slightly, just out of view, but always beside his forever creation. In a galaxy far, far away.